It's Saturday the 12th of November 2005 and I'm discussing now with Jennie Forster, a visitor to Swinton. Jennie normally lives in the Lake District, but she's visiting Swinton today. Her grandfather was Ernest Dixon Drakeford, who, as many people will know, was a bandsman on the R.M.S. Lusitania when she was sunk in 1915 just off the coast of Ireland by a German submarine. Ernest survived and he returned to Swinton, and along with his wife they ran a successful confectioner's business on Bridge Street. And Jennie's just come back today. She's his granddaughter, just to trace a few roots and maybe to visit the graves and visit her old stomping grounds, because Jennie, you were actually born in Mexborough, I understand.
Well, the hospital, yes.
Right. Yeah.
Like probably most people.
If you could just set, so Ernest Dixon Drakeford and Priscilla were your paternal.
Yes.
Grandfather and grandmother.
Yes.
And your father was Ernest's oldest son, is that?
Eldest son.
His name
was William Ernest.
Right. And you were born in
1942.
And Ernest died in 1944.
Yes.
So he would have seen you as a baby then.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Well, I think I do, but I'm not sure, because
Right.
I would only have been two.
Yes.
Less than two when he
Okay.
died. And people told me whether I remember it because people have told me, or I really remember it. I really don't know.
But of course, your grandma Priscilla,
Yes.
she lived to a grand old age,
Yes.
and so you would have remembered visiting the shop and the house as a child.
Oh yes.
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 Closed about 1969, and so around about 1968, something like that.
Yes, I'd left home by then, so I'm
Right.
not really quite sure of the
Right,
dates then.
okay.
But we moved to Swinton in 1951. Before that, we lived in Wath, and we always visited. From Wath, we always visited on Saturday because we used to go to Mexborough. My father at the time was working in the co-op drapery department.
Right. Yes.
And we would visit him in the shop.
Right,
and
in
then-
Mexborough.
Yes.
Where was premises? Where was the premises?
When you got to West Street, to where the Empire thing was, the Empire Cinema.
Yes. Yeah.
Then you turned left as if you were going towards Roman Terrace, and it was just along there.
Okay. Yeah.
Not very far along.
Right.
And
I
it
think
was
that's now pulled down now, though.
probably.
Yeah.
And it was on the left.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he was working there on Saturdays, obviously.
Well, he was working all the time there.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
But we used to call in and see him.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the shop on Bridge Street. Now, my mother, she grew up in that area, and to this day she tells me that it was one of the most interesting shops that she ever went in. She says it was absolutely packed with stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I remember that it was really quite small, and the things they did there would never be allowed today. My grandmother used to make tea cakes, and they were delicious.
Yes, we've heard about these.
But if you'd seen how she made them and where she put them for the dough to raise, you'd be horrified.
Never did
honestly.
anyone any harm, though, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know how many. Yeah, I don't know how many people suffered, but we never had any reports. But you know, you'd just die today. It would never ever be allowed. You know, all this commercial kitchen stuff just did not exist in those days.
But the tea cakes, they were famous for those tea cakes.
She used to make loads.
Yes.
And they always had the bacon hanging at the top of the cellar, I remember. And a big bacon machine.
They used to sell the bacon as well, of course.
And they sold bacon, yeah. They sold everything, and cheese and everything.
Yes.
And,
they even sold pottery, though, didn't they?
Yes.
The Rockingham pottery as well, bits and pieces.
They just sold ordinary pottery.
Well, this is interesting because Ernest's father, as you're aware, he was a potter. He worked in the Don Pottery.
Yes.
And came out of Staffordshire.
He was born in Longton, yes.
Yeah. So, and interesting that down the years they still sort of kept in the pottery trade a little bit, anyway.
Well, yes, and they just she used to go to Sheffield and buy stuff.
Yes.
And And there were things like tea sets,
Yes.
just ordinary tea sets and dinner sets. And
There are people in Swinton who have told me that they still have sets
really?
that they bought in Drakeford shop.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's very true. And I've asked to see them, but they say, oh, they're just ordinary. But I think it's just there's just the sort of connection that I find quite interesting.
when we went to the shop, you know, we'd go on Saturday afternoons quite often, and once the shop had closed, if we were a bit bored, we were allowed to go and weigh bags of sugar.
Right, right.
And they used to buy sugar in those enormous sacks.
Yes.
And then they had those little blue sugar paper bags.
Right.
In £1 and £2, and we were allowed to weigh them up.
Yes, yes.
In advance, because it wasn't pre-packed, and we just used to fold it up and stack it on the shelf. So if anyone came in for sugar, it was already weighed. And we did that to keep us quiet. You know.
I found it quite poignant though that all three of Ernest's sons died before Priscilla. She actually saw them all go, didn't she? She's quite sad, really, of course. And your uncle said how ironic and a twist of fate, really, that he was torpedoed in the Baltic.
Yes.
Well, it's Remembrance Sunday tomorrow, and we'll shortly go, I think, and have a look at the war more, if that's okay. And we've got a poppy cross to place in memory of him.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We've got some wonderful photos as well, and we've been exchanging photos for quite a while now. And some of the products that Priscilla made in that shop, I think, would bring back some memories if we could maybe show that to the camera close up. Let's, if I can just take that out.
You can take it out, yeah.
And this is Priscilla was famous for icing cakes for all occasions, weddings, christenings, wedding anniversaries. And this is a display of a huge variety of different types of confectionery products. That's fantastic. It really, the skill that went into this.
She made the cakes as well.
Yes, of course, yeah. So, your father died in
68.
1968, and at that time was resident of Melrose House.
Yeah.
And your mother continued. Had you left home then?
Yes.
Right, you had already left home.
Yes.
But your mum continued to live there.
Yes. And by that time.
Just cut a minute wrong. Now your father William,
Yes.
his Sunday name, Bill, died. When did he die?
1968.
Right, and at that time the resident at Melrose House.
That's right. Yes.
Were you living at home then?
No, I wasn't. No.
Right. Have you any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have. I've got one brother.
Right. Right.
If you're interested in coincidences,
Mm.
Ken, my father died when his first grandchild was 2.
Okay.
Just like Ernest, who died when I was. He died when I was 2. So there's a good one for you.
Yes, but your mum stayed living in Melrose
Yes,
House until she died.
Until she died.
And when was that?
1989.
Okay, about 1989. Well, so it's a long time since you've been in Melrose House, and we'll take you back there shortly. I can have a little look if that's all right. That's all sorted.
Right.
Now, Ernest was a real car enthusiast, and the family were always going on trips to, in particular, places like Reeton Gap on the Yorkshire coast there.
Yes, they had a bungalow there.
Oh right.
And I've got 1 or 2 photographs of it in its various incarnations.
Right.
Because this bungalow started life as a converted tram. and a caravan.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And it gradually acquired a roof and a veranda.
Right.
And a,
So it wasn't a particularly elaborate holiday home then, a second home then?
no, it wasn't. It wasn't
but it served its
luxurious,
purpose.
but it was there.
Would this be after the shop? Would it be they'll close the shop Saturday afternoon and then go off to Reeton Gap? Is that how it worked?
Well, I think so. I don't know what they did in the 30s, but I imagine that they. All the photos I have look like half Swinton went with them, and lots of relations, you know, all together having a crazy time.
They did share their car and their opportunities. We have a letter from a gentleman who was Swinton resident since the 1920s, and he is a kid. He's a child. He went with the family, and of course your auntie, Mrs. Briggs. Edith. She started off with the journeys.
Well, I've got lots of photos of her there.
Yes, and of course then she went on to marry your uncle, and who was lost at sea in 1945, quite near the war's end, actually, wasn't it? But the pictures of the car here, we know that this is a Clino, rather like one that Ernest owned, and there's another one of Ernest's vehicles here, and also he was a motorcycle enthusiast as well. So
I don't know. That looks like it was like an old motorcycle that everybody had their photographs taken on.
Right. And do we know if this could be at Bridge Street or?
Oh, definitely not at Bridge Street.
No, too green.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
It
was a bit grim down there, wasn't it? Really.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll go off and do a couple of visits now, if that's okay.
Okay.
It was just in 2003. You might remember when you were in the guides that the Second World War one was like a bronze brass plaque.
Yeah.
Well, that's now inside of the church. And here we are, we've got your name of your uncle Sidney Drakeford, killed at sea.
Yeah.
20th of March 1945 in the Baltic.
Yeah.
So, and it's the day before Remembrance Day, so there'll be a few more perhaps tomorrow, and we'll be up here tomorrow morning. And then I think what they do afterwards is they take the crosses like this and they go and put them on the graves around the church. We'll make sure that's done later on. But I mean, it was, well, coming towards the final stage of the Second World War in March 1945. Of course, the war all concluded in May 1945. But he was, they were supplying the Russians still, and he was torpedoed by ironically, the same thing has happened to his dad. His dad had already passed away then, of course. His dad died in 1944.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So he wouldn't know.
It's a shame it was the Baltic and not the Irish Sea, because it would have been warmer in the Irish Sea.
Well, yeah, I don't think there were many survived going into the Baltic in the depths of winter in March.
It would have been jolly cold.
Absolutely. Yeah. Settles and things like that does it, and also subsidence in this area. But I mean, if it's cleaned up, all this decoration will come out.
Oh, that's only lichen, isn't it? It's lichen.
Oh, it's only like a sort of well, actually, it's a living creature.
It shows that the air is quite clean around here now, because lichen doesn't grow in.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so compared to how things were.
How it was.
Yeah, I mean, because you'd got sort of Manvers coke ovens in that direction.
Exactly.
Coming across here.
My dad used to say, what is the point of smoking tip cigarettes if you live in Parkgate?
Yeah. Was Ernest a smoker? Was he a smoker?
Yes.
Yeah.
They were all smokers.
That's what Richard told me.
Yeah.
Because Richard's father was Harry, the youngest one. Harry was only in his 60s, wasn't he? Just 60 something.
I don't think he smoked. Did he?
He was.
I don't remember him smoking.
Right. Okay.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't seem to remember him smoking. My dad certainly did smoke.
Yeah. She was in, Priscilla was in Charnwood House, wasn't she, when she
I
died?
think so.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, when I wanted to put that in the little book, but I tried always to verify that, and
Yes.
I contacted social services if they'd got the records going back to, you know, I gave them the date and everything like that, and but they just were unable to sort of verify that.
No, she was.
And
yeah.
and Ron actually checked the local press as well,
Yeah.
and we weren't able to pick up, you know, from the press report of the death where she was. So I knew it, but I couldn't sort of prove it. But yeah. Anyway, we'll get hold of somebody and see if we can get it sorted.
So let me know.
Okay.
Because we'd be
Hey,
happy
Peter.
to do it.
This lady's the granddaughter of Ernest Dixon Drakeford. The first time she's been back to Swinton since 1980.